Travel and Things in association with Rugged Wear, Real People, Real Clothing, Real Solutions presents In Conversation With. I'm your host, David Batsoffen, and I don't have one guest today. I, in fact, have two. I have David Scott and Tori Trimm. Good evening or good morning to both of you. Hi, guys. How are you doing?
Good morning.
So good. Thank you for having us.
It's only a pleasure. Tori, for some reason, you've disappeared off my screen, but I have David up there. What we're going to be chatting about this evening, I'll go through the slides and then I'll come back so I have you on screen. I know that you together, David, with your mom and dad, Jonathan and Angie Scott, have started a series of podcasts. You've also put out some ebooks on wildlife photography, and you've done 10 iconic images. So let's go back to the podcasts. Oops, if we can, he says. I've now gone somewhere that I shouldn't have. Let's just go back. Where have I gone to? David, where are you? I'll get back to this in a moment. Well, let's just talk while I chat. There we go.
Sure.
Miracle of modern technology. Before I get onto those three things, I want to talk about two books. And you know where I'm going with this. It's
Right.
Sacred Nature 1 and Sacred Nature 2. The first one was called Life's Eternal Dance, and the second one, Reconnecting People to Our Planet. And as I said to your mom and your dad, these are two of singularly the most beautiful books I've ever received. David, your involvement, and Tori, your involvement in those two, and then we'll move on to the podcasts.
Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, I think my parents have done a lot of books over their careers, and it was a few years ago when the idea of Sacred Nature came up, and it was at least the first volume, and it was basically a celebration of, their entire career and especially their photography career and kind of an accumulation of their best work. And I had never had an opportunity to actually work with them directly in terms of combining our skill sets. My particular craft is in graphic design. And so we had this idea, hey, can we apply some of your craft, graphic design? Would you be willing to design the books? And they obviously have all this incredible content. And so we just decided to do it. And it was more a labor of love and a passion project rather than any sort of desire for financial gain or anything like that. It was more driven by love and passion and a celebration of their legacy. And it was just, it was a beautiful project. It was wonderful for me to be able to design with such incredible content and have the creative freedom, having them be the kind of the clients. And then the project went really, really well. And a few years later, then we decided to do Sacred Nature 2. And Tori was hugely involved in Sacred Nature 2 in terms of how we brought it to market and released it and stuff like that.
Talk us through that, Tori.
Yeah, it was such an exciting project to work on. Just my experience being more in marketing and David's being solely in, graphic design, branding. It was like this nice opportunity for all of us to finally work on our first project together. And it was really cool to obviously see, being officially part of the family now, I can see it anecdotally, but to actually see the overwhelming support from other photographers, from people they'd followed since the Big Cat Diary era, new followers that were, trickling in through places like social media and YouTube. It was really cool to see, this breadth of support for such a timely project, especially with everything that was going on back in 2020 with the pandemic. It was just, a really heartwarming project to be a part of. And then the fact that obviously the Kickstarter went really well and we were able to produce the book was such an awesome accomplishment. So really proud of that work for sure.
Well done to you and well done to HPH Publishing for getting it out there.
Definitely.
I say both books. If you're into wildlife and into photography, you need both of those in a lockup safe so they're protected and safe for generations to come. But now the podcasts and the ebooks, pardon me, this puts a whole new spin on things, guys, because now you're not tied back to a publisher who can be very demanding, I should imagine. You can do your own thing, both on the podcast and in the ebook. So let's look at the podcasts first. You guys are in the States, your folks are in Africa. How does this work? Do you do it via Zoom, or, you know, and then edit it down? Talk us through the process.
Yeah, Tori, do you want to take that, and I'll chip
Yeah.
in?
Yeah, so basically we had a nice opportunity to kind of work on the planning together. Jonathan and Angie came to visit us in Santa Fe in June of last year, and we really used it as a work session. The podcast was something they'd been passionate about for a long time. Their followers had been curious about whether or not that was a sort of media they would dive into. And when we sat down in June, we basically wrote out a bunch of ideas as far as, you know, what content do we really want to share that aligns with the educate, inspire, and conserve ethos.
Right.
So we wrote a bunch of ideas, different concepts, different treatments, and then we bought a bunch of equipment so that we could make it happen remotely. Got Jonathan set up with a very fancy microphone, similar to the one you probably have. And yeah, somehow we've made it work remotely, where Jonathan will record. He has his little sound booth set up in Nairobi. He puts his do not disturb sign on the door so that Angie doesn't ask questions. And then he'll send me all of the files. I'll edit them down, add music. And yeah, so far the audience has really, really enjoyed it. We kicked off the series with more of a storytelling series. So it's a 10-part series on becoming the big cat people, which many folks are often curious about, like what brought Jonathan to Kenya, how did him and Angie meet, how did they get involved with the Marsh Lions, and kind of that entire background story. And then eventually we'd love to branch out into, you know, speaking on topics like conservation, maybe chatting with the founders of some of the organizations that Jonathan and Angie are patrons of, speaking with other photographers, educators. Sky's the limit. So we're really excited to finally have that off the ground.
I think that's the beauty of podcasts. Sorry, David, I think I spoke over you. Is that you're able to take topics that are of interest to you and bring them to the people. But just as a quick aside, if I might, David, you were brought up in Africa, I'm assuming, and then left for the States. Is that how you met Tori? Because you mentioned how your mom and Jonathan met. So I'm curious to know how you two met.
Yeah, the most pivotal moment in my life was meeting Tori.
And now you're in New Mexico and she's in California. Come on.
Yeah, I know. I miss her daily. Can't wait for her to be back. But yeah, so I was born in England, but I grew up in East Africa, obviously, because of what mom and dad did. And then I went back to England for boarding school between the ages of 14 and 18. But I'd go back frequently in between Kenya and England. And then I came over to the States about 20 years ago. 20 years ago. And I was initially in New Mexico, and I was here for a few years. And then I went to San Francisco, where I was for 13 years. And that's where I met Tori. Okay. We both worked at the same company. And yeah, it was love at first sight. And then life changed forever. So
little did Tori know what she was getting into.
Yes.
Oh, lucky me. The coolest in-laws to ever exist. I got very, very lucky.
Wonderful. All right. So let's look. David, did you want to add something to the podcasts?
Only just, I mean, Tori summed it up so perfectly, but I was just going to add, podcasts had been something that we'd been interested in doing for such a long time. And Tori had always actually said it's a great platform because it's so accessible to be able to do one. You just need a little bit of equipment and to get up and running. It's actually fairly simple. And Jonathan and Angie, they just have so many incredible stories and so much to share. So it had been something that we'd really wanted to set up for such a long time. So it's great to actually finally just kind of get the equipment, set them up, and not be discouraged by the fact that they're in different time zones, different locations. It's so possible to do. And so, yeah, having it up running now is just great.
And if you want to know if Jonathan is away from his sound booth, the best way to get sound is to do it in a closed vehicle.
Oh, interesting.
Vehicles make lovely sound booths. Trust me, I've done it.
That's great.
That's a
Definitely
great.
useful to know.
Okay, so when they're on safari, that's no excuse to not
No,
record a podcast.
none whatsoever. So talking about going on safari, nice segue there, Tori. Thank you very much for helping me out with that one. Wildlife photographer, the basics for beginners. And beginners will look at this particular ebook and drool at those particular lenses, because it's just not fair that two people sitting next to each other should have equipment like that. There should be a law against it. I'm sorry. I have lens envy just looking at that.
It's
Yeah,
so true.
Yeah.
So talk me through the books, because the layout of this makes it so easy for photographers of whatever level, because I do believe that photographers are constantly learning. And if you're not constantly learning, you're stagnating, and other people will come along and they'll overtake you in their droves. But you've laid this out so well, and I don't know whose door to lay this at, where you've got a picture, they tell you how to take it, they tell you the equipment, they tell you the lighting, all sorts of almost the backstory to the image.
Right. I mean, thank you again for that. I mean, it's very much a team effort, as pretty much everything is that we do. So it's kind of a combination of all of our skill sets coming together as one. I think the ebooks, we really just wanted to do something that made content very accessible to their audience and to any audience, really. I think you touched on it. Physical books are great, but there's a whole bunch of barriers to creating them, and very cost prohibitive, and you come up against a lot of challenges and restrictions. The idea to move into ebooks just makes it so much more accessible, controllable via us, and we can kind of produce them much easier. And then as far as the actual content itself, again, Jonathan and Angie had this just breadth and such an incredible library of content. It's like a playground for us in terms of imagery and stories and information that they can put out there. So they typically will supply that. We'll kind of collaborate together as a team on what the content is and what the lessons might be. Typically driven by Jonathan or Angie. Then I'll step in and start to lay out and use my graphic design skill set to actually create the design of the book and kind of put things together. And then Tori's there to always kind of keep us in check and make sure everything is kind of being up to the right level, and in terms of it also being easy to understand and easy to consume.
And easily accessible to the masses.
Yeah.
Exactly. Another thing, because the pricing is really reasonable. I think they're about $10 a piece. You can get them online, and if you really want, you can print them out rather than getting them on your laptop. But and I don't know who's going to take this one. Do you get to a point, seeing that you sort of the marketing arm, Tori? Do you say to them, look, this is for this particular story or this particular ebook, I'm looking for stories about X, whatever the X might be. Don't tell me about the lions and the cubs. Tell me about the leopards and the pythons, rather. I want something a little different, so that there's reason for your audience to want every book that comes out.
Definitely. No, I think definitely with every content approach we've had, there's always a respect for the audience and what the audience wants. Ever since I started managing their Instagram and Facebook sometime last year, I mean, I knew, again, anecdotally, that people were curious about their lives and their tips, but until you see the messages and the comments and the flood of people, there's such an appetite to learn more, whether it's, to your point, specific species like birds, bird photography, or motion photography like cheetahs at top speed.
I know that one iconic picture of the cheetah and the wildebeest is breathtaking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
I have an issue.
There is that.
I have an issue around bird photographers. I have no patience. And there's that. I think he's an Austrian photographer who spent 6 years, 72,000 images to get the image of a kingfisher just before it hits the water. And I'm going, no, I couldn't be bothered. It cost him his marriage in the long run. but did it really? And what did he get out of it? He's got 71,999 images on a hard drive somewhere that he's going to just toss. I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
don't have the patience. Wildlife at least
Yeah.
performs, or it doesn't, and you move on.
Yeah.
David, are you able to control your parents in
Oh, definitely not.
into their enthusiasm and, we want you to do this and we want you to do that, and you go, not yet. That's for book 4 and 5.
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's definitely just a collaboration and a partnership. They have a ton of passion and a ton of kind of vision and desire to do certain things, and then we really do come together as a team, and we often kind of debate things, and we'll say, actually, that's best suited for a later book, or let's start with these ones, let's focus the attention here. And they'll put forward their strong thoughts, but ultimately we always kind of debate things out. And I think they trust me and Tori a lot in terms of being able to navigate a little bit of the market and kind of the business side of things. They bring that wonderful experience and 50 years of being out in the field, but they're really looking to me and Tori to kind of drive the decisions on the business side of things, I guess. And even, I mean, the hardest things is when it comes down to actually picking the content. I mean, picking the photo.
I was going to say, I know they gave you free reign on Sacred Nature 1 and 2, or so
Yes.
you told me. And
yes,
that she must have been sitting in a room screaming into a pillow.
Yes.
She had no control over what you come up with.
Yeah.
But what you produced, as I've said before, is stunning. And she couldn't have had a word to say about, oh, why didn't you use this image rather than that? But now with these ebooks, it's a whole new world out there. And I'm sure you've got a little bit more, please use this and don't use that. Or
absolutely. And I really, so much of it comes down to trust. I mean, we all trust each other implicitly. So if one of us has a very strong opinion on, we really think it should be this for these reasons, then typically the other members will trust that decision. But definitely, I think with the imagery and the ebooks, a lot of the time we look to Angie or Jonathan and we're like, which images are the best examples that we should use for this particular lesson or this particular story? And they will, undoubtedly have the right decision on the right images. So me and Tori won't fight that at all, just because it comes from their history and their deep knowledge of whatever material it is that we're communicating. So again, they'll pretty much drive that most of the time.
All right, now the last book that I want to chat about is 10 Iconic Images. Why 10? Why not 12 or 15? Or is there a second book in the offing? Tori, I hear you sniggering in the background.
Maybe that'll be the second edition, is the 10 that weren't in the first, the second 10.
This must have been incredibly difficult to choose only 10. And I mean, like I say, the wildebeest and the cheetah image is beyond spectacular. And I've specifically not used that slide in this chat because I want people to go and buy these books and go, oh wow, David was actually right. These are stunning.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, I appreciate that. We appreciate that so much. I think you touch on one of the hardest things is picking the images. I mean, again, it's this thing where you start off with a really wide range of pictures, photos, and you literally have you, especially with the Sacred Nature books, actually going back to those, it was like we were only allowed, let's say, 150 images is in this entire book, and we start off with 1,000, and then it's this process of just culling and cutting. And so with the 10 iconic images, it was an act of discipline to be like, how do we pick 10 iconic images? We're not allowed 20, we're not allowed 30. That's not to say that we won't, release the next volume of the next 10, because it's fun to do. And I think also it's partly just highlighting the image itself and the inspiring story behind it. But then Jonathan and Angie made sure to actually they want to deliver more value, and so they kind of talk about what it took to get that image, what was the field craft behind it, what was the equipment that was used, and so trying to not only just show the image but also show how it was captured, what would it would be like if someone else was to try and capture the same image,
try and replicate, because some of those images, people go, oh, but that's blurred, I would never have used that. And then you look again a second and third time and go, no, the blurring is necessary, because if that had been used at a higher speed, it would have been frozen, then it wouldn't look the same.
The energy wouldn't be the same.
I think both your mom and dad, David, and I, and I'm not putting me in the same category skills-wise, but we came up the same way, which is starting in film camera, and you had to create in the viewfinder the image that you were going to produce. You don't want to spend hours and hours in a dark room, because you couldn't sometimes. You either got it or you didn't. And I think all three of us have taken that into the digital era, and we still utilize those skills rather than hours of manipulation using one of the software programs.
Absolutely. It's so true. I think it's Jonathan who often says, he would say this better, and it's actually probably in the ebooks even better than this, but it comes down to how you see, rather than how to take a great photograph. It literally starts with how you see. It's not about the camera, it's not about the equipment, it's not about the end process. It's how do you see first, and then start there, and then build from that.
It's like when you go to somebody for dinner and they present you with a really nice meal. You don't go, oh, this was a wonderful meal, you must have a really, really cool stove. You don't do that. You just go, you made a really nice meal. And it's the same, same with photography. Now, we've spoken around the books. Where can people get hold of them? Is it all online? Can they go through your parents' website, Tori? Can they go to Amazon? Where do you go?
Yeah. So for now, they're exclusively available at their website, which is bigcatpeople.com. We have a shop tab on the website, and that's where you can see the 2 ebooks that are currently live and for sale, the 2 that we've chatted about today. And then you'll also see a glimpse of the coming soon ebooks. So the next in this first series of 5 that we'll be launching. So if you click the coming soon and sign up to the email newsletter, then you'll be one of the first to know.
All right. So let's do a spoiler alert, because that's what everybody does nowadays. Give me a sort of a hint as to what books 3 and 4 might be.
David,
I can put you on the spot, guys.
Yeah, I mean, definitely one of the next ones that's very exciting that we're going to be releasing is it's kind of a guide to a photographic safari, because we know that this is, there is so much knowledge and, again, educational material that they can release that people want to consume when they're about to head out on a safari, in particular a photographic safari. But I think it actually spans across, you don't have to just be a photography. This is kind of applicable to any safari. But we kind of have this idea of doing almost a series of these. And so based off of different locations. So it's how to plan an African safari. We start in the Mara Serengeti, because that's obviously their backyard. And so, this one of the next ebooks will be how to have a photographic safari in Mara Serengeti, prepare for all that, everything you need to know, from choosing a camp to what to think about when you're choosing the right drivers and the right guides, all the equipment that you might need, packing lists, all that kind of stuff. So, and then that will be the beginning of doing that. Then maybe there'll be another one for Namibia, maybe there'll be another one for Botswana, that kind of thing.
Rule number 1, do not bring an iPad on a game drive vehicle. I'm sorry.
No,
it's not banned. The camera.
Totally banned. Yeah, absolutely not. And then we've just started working. Actually, Tori mentioned birds, and I know that we said bird photography is a whole different type of thing. You need a lot more patience, but there are a lot of bird photographers out there. So we've been thinking about doing a bird photography specific ebook. So we'll start working on that as well. And then another one that's going to be released is called The Art of Photography. And that actually has a little bit more, because we're actually taking a step back. We looked at the breadth of content that we could release, and we actually wanted to actually kind of do different material for different types of people and make sure that we were kind of creating a breadth so that there was a range that people could dip into. So maybe some stuff is very specific around travel. Maybe some stuff is very specific around photography. Some stuff is more around stories and kind of the art behind it. So the art of photography actually is less technical, and it's more about thinking about photography, like we were actually just saying, the art of seeing and the philosophy around it. And so it's actually more conceptual and more thought-provoking.
It also allows people to dip in and out of the books. You don't have to follow the 10 images, for instance, 1 to 10. You can do 3, you can do 7, you can do
absolutely
3.
Yeah, they actually stand independently of each other, and they all have a slightly different value prop. And the last one I'll mention is and then this actually speaks to the breadth. We decided we wanted to go a little bit more deeper on some technical knowledge. And so we specifically focused on light, because light is such an important component to photography. And so exposure, and we call it mastering light. And so we go a little bit more into exposure and how photographers can actually use light and learn about exposure and speed and that kind of thing in their photography.
We're almost out of time. I have to say thank you to both of you. This has been such a wonderful, wonderful chat. It really and truly has been. I look forward to when the next books come out to pick up our time together again, and we can talk about those. Once again, it's available. The books are available on Jonathan and Angie's website, which is Big Cat People.
Yes.
Okay, bigcatpeople.com, I should imagine.
That's right.
Yes.
Great stuff. Tori, David, thank you so very much for taking time to join me. I look forward to the next books, and I look forward to Sacred Nature 3, because I'm sure there's going to be one. And if there isn't, I'm going to be the first one knocking on your door saying, do it now.
No, thank you so much, David. Yeah, it's been a real pleasure, and your passion is so apparent. It comes through in volumes through the call.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. You take care. Have a wonderful time. I know that you're in America now where the weather is not great. We've still got sunshine here. I'll send you a picture of what an African sunset looks like.
Oh gosh, yes, please do. Pull at the heartstrings.
Yeah, my guests would be in conversation with have been Tori Trimm and David Scott, and we've been talking about ebooks, we've been talking about podcasts, and we've been talking about the book Sacred Nature 1 and 2, published by HPH Publishing. Once again, guys, thanks for being my guests.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks, David.